So, like I said, we've been in this series called Lent. Lent, as I told you, is one of those times in the church year, the church calendar. I was talking to a friend about this morning. That helps us to really navigate the calendar. Now, this isn't something we made up. It's not something of one single group of churches made up. It is something that people use all around the world. We call it the lectionary. You could look it up. You could look up lectionary. You'd find pages of different groups that have lectionary pages. Ones that I really like is there's a page, lectionary.vanderbilt.edu. It's a professor at Vanderbilt who puts together an entire page for the lectionary. Again, he doesn't make it up either. This is a thing that is just, it is a thing that tons of people from all different kinds of churches came together across denominational lines, across different theological understandings, but all came together and finally agreed on something. Can you imagine? Agreed on something to create these set of readings that help us to all kind of tell the same story and be on the same journey. It's really cool when you think about it, that there are literally millions, billions of believers in the way of Jesus around the world reading the same passages that we're reading today and learning from those stories, looking at them in all kinds of different angles in all kinds of different ways. As we go through it, and we'll start this in the fall, we go through year A, year B, and year C, and then here's what's cool, rinse and repeat and do it again. And you get your opportunity to take that cube of that story and turn that thing around and look at it different ways to peel the layers of it and see what's under there and what's going on in that story. But the best part about the lectionary isn't just that. It is the fact that we go over and over and over again in the stories. I'm sure you feel this way too. Like, one of my favorite things about living in Indiana is not the potholes, to be clear. And by the way, there's a 2-bedroom apartment on Southport Road. You just have to go down into it, okay? But it's not the pothole, but it is, I love the change of the season that brings us the potholes. Does that make sense? The potholes are the bad part, the change of the seasons is the good part, right? But I love the change of the seasons. And I never have said to myself, it's weird, right? When this time of year ends, and if you put your coat on this morning, you're like, I don't want to grab my coat. It was so nice yesterday. Like, it was nice today. Well, it wasn't nice yesterday. It was rainy yesterday. It was so nice, last week. But you start to get towards spring. And I don't know about you. If you ever walked outside at springtime and you say to yourself, dang it, it's 70 and sunny. Birds are chirping. I wasn't ready for this. Oh, you don't say that. You're excited. And then it gets a little warmer. I never say to myself, it's 85 degrees. I get to swim in the pool. I get to hang out and enjoy this weather. I get to sit by the baseball field in shorts and a t-shirt like, I don't want to enjoy this. And then it gets to the fall, and you go down to Brown County, and the leaves are changing. Nobody goes down and goes, it's so ugly, all these brown and red and yellow leaves. Oh, you love the change of the season. And you get to winter, and it's weird that we say things like, we go, the first snow of the year. Well, by the 7th one, you're like, stop it. I can't do this anymore. But isn't it weird, though, that we do those over and over again? And every year, you don't get tired of it. You don't get tired of looking out the window and seeing the beauty of the snowflakes coming down. You don't get tired every year of seeing the colors of the trees. You don't get tired of hearing the birds in the spring singing. You don't get tired of the sound of the kids screaming as they're jumping into the water of the pool. You don't get tired of those things. You do them over and over and over again. And that's what the lectionary is for us. It is something that we get to do over and over and over again. And as we do it, we don't get tired of it. We go deeper into the story. And we learn more from it. And it helps us develop a pattern for life. Celebrating the meaning of incarnation. Celebrating the meaning of Jesus' birth. Celebrating the meaning of the resurrection. I don't want to miss Easter. I don't want to miss a year where I don't get to celebrate. And so this helps us get into that season. So we go into this Lent season. So we're not just rushing to Easter, but we're walking slowly, admiring the stories that get us there. And that's what we've been getting to do all of these few weeks. Next week, as we continue that, we get even closer to Easter. We're getting to Palm Sunday. We're getting to Easter Sunday. What an awesome, exciting time in the year. Well, last year as we did this, we focused on a story. This lectionary season, this season of Lent, we've been in the book of Luke. And I told you, I think Luke to me is just one of the coolest gospels that we have. So, we have Matthew, we have Mark, we have Luke, we have John, and they're all unique in their own way, and they all tell the story in a little bit different way. What I love about Luke is an educated person. We know that because he talks about having a person that paid for his work that he did. He had a patron, basically, who paid for him to go around and interview people about the story of Jesus. He said, I want to help you to understand everything that you may have heard, and I'm going to do my best to put it in a way that will help you understand and learn the story. He went on, it was really cool. He did such a good job with the first book. He made a second one called the book of Acts that then tells us about the story of the early church, and we get into that after Easter. And so that's what I love about Luke. Luke also does a really good job at helping us see some of the challenges that maybe the early church faced, because when you read the Gospels, you are reading the early church trying to wrestle with what does Jesus mean. So they tell the stories about Jesus to wrestle with how do we follow Jesus? What is this whole Jesus thing about? What are some stories about the stuff that Jesus did? Because it's not just about the resurrection. It's about the new life that we experience it through that experience, but also through his teaching. I think his teaching is a critical element to who Jesus is, but we also see in that some of the challenges faced by the early church during this time. And some of the biggest things that they faced, and I don't know if this would really be surprising to us at all, that one of the biggest challenges that the early church faced was people deciding who should belong and who shouldn't belong. That's strange. Who would ever think that the church would struggle with welcoming people in the doors of the church? Who would think that 2,000 years later we'd still be struggling with stuff like this, right? And so Luke told a story about some of these people. Call them what you want. Probably call them, they were Pharisees and scribes, but we might call them thought police. We might call them gatekeepers. We might just call them jerks who stood with their arms folded back going, ugh, right? Well, here's how this started out. We looked at last week. He says, now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus. It's weird. We don't really sit around typically and go, oh, Cheryl, those tax collectors. I don't really know any tax collectors. And if I knew anybody who worked for the IRS, I'd feel bad for them right now. But back then, that really wasn't the case. I'm trying to think of a way to say it, because I really don't want to offend anybody. Let's not do that. Tax collectors, though, they were in a situation where they were just fraudulent. They were taking advantage of people. They collected your tax, and then they would be like, well, Matt, you owe $6.99. Well, you really owe $3.99. But they would put the other money away for themselves. So they were frauding people. They were horrible. And they worked for the Romans, and the Romans had taken over this area, so everybody just hated the tax collectors, just terrible people. And then he said the sinners were also coming. Sinners is sort of just a generic word. Well, just a bunch of sinners, just a bunch of bad people. But they were coming near to listen to Jesus. The Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, this fellow, which again I told you last week is one of my favorite descriptions of Jesus. If you ever describe me, I just want you to, this fellow, you ought to see this fella. That's how my dad would say it. He'd say, this fella. This fellow welcomes sinners. And it's not just that he welcomes sinners. Kurt, he doesn't just say, come on in, you're good. He eats with them. And this is a big deal, right? I don't know about you, but there are certain people that I'm like, I'll be friendly to, and I'll be like, this is cool, right? But then I'll be like, should I invite them over? Well, I might invite them over. Maybe we'll have burgers. Maybe we'll do outside hangout first, right? But I got to know you if I'm going to welcome you into my house, right? And then I'm going to take you further into my kitchen. If we really become friends, you might come into my living room, right? But Jesus, he's like, come on in, fellas. Let's go all the way back. He welcomes them in. He eats with them. He's hanging out with these terrible people. And the Pharisees and the scribes, again, are just standing over here at the door, looking over, going, what an idiot. Are you kidding me? Eating with people like that. Just judge. Oh, Judgy McJudgerson all the way, right? So we find Luke opening up this passage with this, describing these religious people folding their arms, standing in awful displeasure at these these sinners, tax collectors, and Jesus. And so we kept reading last week. We discovered that Jesus responded to them by telling 3 parables. I told you last week, Jesus and Luke here, as he put this together, knows the rule of 3, that it normally takes us 3 times to get something. This is why, in my family, my wife says something about 3 times, I finally hear what she's saying, right? Like, this is why we have to repeat things 3 times over to finally get it. This is why I told you last week that we see things like reduce, reuse, and recycle, because we have to have it we can't just say one thing. The pattern of 3 helps us remember stuff. So Jesus begins to tell these Pharisees and scribes 3 stories to try to get them to figure stuff out. And he's hoping by the 3rd one, maybe these guys will get it. And I don't know if they got it by the 3rd parable, but the purpose was that Jesus wanted to expose the gatekeeping mentality they had. Gatekeeping had crept into their faith, and it was a huge mess. Because what it caused them to do was they started to have an inability to see a God whose grace was bigger than they could imagine. And this isn't made up by Jesus. If we looked back, and we did look back last week into the scriptures, we see that this is always the picture that was painted of God. But over and over and over again, this incredible picture that was painted, people would come alongside and they would try to frame that picture. But they would take a mat and they would close that mat in as far as they could around that picture. And Jesus, all he does is he takes that frame and he breaks it. He says, you missed the whole beautiful picture. Because people have been trying to mat this picture to make it look smaller and smaller and smaller. And he says to the scribes and the Pharisees, somehow you missed the point. So the God that Jesus describes in these stories, he didn't stand with crossed arms. He searched for what was lost. He celebrated what was found. And the things that are found are us. And he tells them, he says, look, I've just been inviting you to come. Welcome home. Come to the table. And I don't think I really don't think that he's looking at them and saying, so get out. Because you missed it, you messed up, get out. I don't think that's Jesus at all. I think he's looking at them saying, you missed the point. Now, there's room. Come sit down with us. You'll get mercy and grace and forgiveness just like everybody else. Just come to the table and taste the grace. Yet we see something interesting. And this is what I want us to see. That while God isn't picking sides, while he's pulling everyone closer into the table, what's really fascinating about salvation, what's really fascinating about as we sit at that table, is that we are going to find ourselves on some sides. And those sides are what I do want to talk about today. Because Jesus didn't divide everything into lines. He didn't come to reinforce lines. He came to redraw lines. More accurately, he came to erase them so that we could transform our hearts. And as our hearts are transformed, we start to see his salvation, not just an experience of sitting at the table, but realizing what that means as we invite others to the table. And that's what the story today is going to teach us about, and that's what I think is going to be really cool. Because when it comes to salvation, salvation is not just a feeling. Salvation is not just an experience. Salvation is not an abstract theological category. Salvation is not a golden ticket to heaven. Salvation is liberation. Salvation is transformation. Salvation is when Jesus enters your life and things begin to change about how the way you live your life. The people around you change as a result of the change in your life. And this brings us to the story that I want to look at specifically today, about another person that Jesus chose to eat with. And this is another person that people would have been upset to see Jesus eat with. That they would have said, he's at it again. He's at it again. He's doing it again. He just can't stop eating with tax collectors and sinners. Can you imagine not getting the point? You think eventually they'd be like, oh, well, maybe that's the point, right? They don't get it, and they would have been angry about this. But this guy's story teaches us something, and guys, I think it is one of the most beautiful things we can learn about salvation. In Luke 19, it goes on like this. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. And a man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector. He wasn't just a tax collector. He was a chief tax collector. And he was rich. Now, as my daughter says, I'm having a feeling that what Luke is trying to get us to say here is, this dude was rich. He wasn't just rich, he was rich, and he was proud of being rich. He was the sort of rich that isn't trying to help anybody out by being rich. He's rich, like I'm rich, and I'm going to make you feel bad that you're not rich like I'm rich. That's who Zacchaeus is. This is not a, he was rich, so, you should be impressed with his wealth. Luke is writing this, he was rich, and you should go, ugh. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was short in stature. Now, I have short friends, and I'm not making fun of my short friends, and Luke is not making fun of short people. To be clear here, he is not saying that short people are the problem. He is making fun of Zacchaeus because he is rich, and he is overcompensating with his rich because he can't see over everybody else, so he wants to get his nose as far over everybody else. Make sense? Right? So he ran ahead. He climbed a sycamore tree to see Jesus because he was going to pass that way. So that's kind of cool. He's like, I want to see this Jesus. And we don't really know why, do we? Right? We don't really know why he wanted to see Jesus. We don't know about his curiosity. I'm not exactly sure. But it does say when Jesus came to the place, he looked up, sees Zacchaeus up in this tree, and says to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down. I want to stay at your house today. Now again, listen, I want us to imagine, I don't want to go too long on this, but I want you to imagine these scribes and Pharisees are watching because they want to see what Jesus is going to do too, and they're looking, and they see Jesus, and he looks up, and he goes, hey, Zacchaeus, and they go, does he know the name of the rich guy? And they're like, so Jesus eats with sinners and tax collectors and that rich guy? And then he's like, I want to stay at your house. And they're like, why don't you want to stay at my house? Well, because you're judgy. And nobody likes you guys, right? No, he's like, I want to stay with this guy. So Zacchaeus hurried down and was happy to welcome him. All who saw it began to grumble and said, he has gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner. Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. If I have defrauded anyone of anything, he knows he has, I will pay back 4 times as much. Then Jesus said to him, today, salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost. Now, look, I want to go back to something incredible here. Zacchaeus didn't just get a visit from Jesus and then go back to an old life of defrauding and being this horrible person that he was. He changed. He repented. And this is a word that's huge. He made restitution. He acted. And because of his actions, do you see how this works? Because of his actions, that's when Jesus declared, salvation has come to this house. And I think this is such a huge statement because salvation didn't just come to Zacchaeus. Salvation didn't just happen to him. It wasn't just a spiritual reality. Now, all of a sudden, he was okay, and Jesus is like, reaches in back pocket, hands him a ticket to heaven, and says, I can't wait to see you after you die. He didn't say that. He says, Zacchaeus, tell me what it looks like now that you've received salvation, now that you've seen what salvation looks like. How are you going to live your life? How are you going to live today, not just then, but now? What's that going to look like? And he says, Lord, I'll take half my possessions. I'll give to the poor. If I defrauded anyone, I'll pay back 4 times as much. And Jesus says, now, yes, you got it. Now salvation is here. It came through to Zacchaeus, to the people that he had cheated, defrauded, and harmed. He made things right. And when he gave back what he had taken, the ripple effect of salvation moved outward. And here's the key, because that's what salvation does. It transforms the oppressor and it heals the oppressed. Do you hear that? It transforms the oppressor, it heals the oppressed. And this is, to be clear, this is what Jesus said salvation would always look like. Jesus said this was always what it would look like. So if we ever had an idea that salvation was Jesus reaching in his back pocket for a golden ticket to heaven and giving that to us, then we missed the point. This is what salvation always looked like, and Luke made sure that we knew that. It says in Luke 4, when Jesus came to Nazareth, and I've read this before, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day. This is the very first thing that Jesus ever did in ministry, the very first time he ever preached a message. It was his custom to go to church, and he went to church. He stood up. He was on the schedule to read the passage for that day. Imagine how this all worked together. Incredible. He gets handed the scroll of the prophet Isaiah. He unrolled the scroll. He found a place where it was written, and he reads this. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Jesus announces this ancient practice that we call Jubilee. And Jubilee was not someone just saying, you're good, you're good, you're good. I'll see you in the afterlife sometime later on. Do your best. The year of Jubilee was like social upheaval. It was, you have a debt, your debts are forgiven. It says, you have mistreated people, you're going to do some restitution to make things right. He says the low places, we talked about this, are going to be made flat. The mountains are going to come down. He's talking about a reality of the world that will change everything and put people on an equal footing. He says, we are going to change everything. And he says, I am proclaiming now that you are a part of God's kingdom to transform this world to the way that God wants it. This is a huge, huge statement. And everybody's like, yes, yes. And then he says, and then everybody gets to be a part of it. People begin to think about what this looks like and what this means. Well, that's why they tried to throw Jesus off a cliff soon afterwards, because they realized, wait a minute, maybe this is going too far. Maybe this is, I don't know how I feel about that. Jesus, that's a little socialist, don't you think? I don't know about that. I mean, he's pushing some buttons, guys, is what I'm trying to tell you. Now look what happens next. He rolled up the scroll. He gave it back to the attendant. He sat down. The eyes in the synagogue were fixed on him. And then he began to say to them, today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. And here's what I want us to see. Jesus wasn't offering a distant hope or some kind of future promise here. Jesus was announcing that salvation was happening right now. That it was going to happen with those people in their town, in their synagogue. That something was going to change right there in that little town, in that place, and it was going to be a ripple effect that was going to change the world. If only they would buy in. If they would say, yes, I'll be a part of this. Yes, I want to do this. Yes, I want to see salvation experienced. It was right there. And it wasn't this ticket to heaven idea that I think we've created in the Western church, but a picture of salvation that was supposed to be tangible and a present reality of heaven that would take root in the people's lives right there in that moment. And this is what gets me fired up. Because guys, what would the world look like if we took it serious? And I'm not saying, I'm going to vote a certain way, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do... No. I'm going to change my life. I'm going to start living differently. I'm going to start treating people a certain way. Because I'm not going to wait for somebody else to change the world. Jesus has asked me to transform it in my relationships, in my city, in my community, with the people that I know, and that does something powerful. That brings salvation. That brings the kingdom of God near. That transforms this earth, and it will never be the same. That is awesome. And I just hate that we sit around and we go, what a nice idea. Wouldn't that be nice if we all lived like that? What are we doing? Like, get me the first train to the kingdom of God in this world. I'm on. That's what I want to be. That's what we should be. See, there are moments, and this is what I think Jesus shows us with Zacchaeus, where he's saying, I want to rescue you. I want to rescue you from selfishness. I want to rescue you from pride. I want to rescue you from greed. And I want you to live out your salvation by freeing captives, lifting broken people, and undoing oppression where you find it. There are moments on the other side of that, though. And this is what's so powerful about it. This is why this is so life-changing, guys. On the other side of it, there are moments where we're the ones who are poor in spirit. We're the ones who are experiencing being weighed down. We're the ones who are experiencing being lost in our pain. And then there are moments when somebody shows up with compassion and justice and grace. And we receive the tangible expression of salvation through their love. See, what this story teaches us is that we participate in this great moment of salvation by both offering it to people and embracing it. And that salvation isn't like a gate that we walk through that all of a sudden we got in and we go, all right, I'm in. And I'm not sure about you or you or you or you or you. And we start doing this number. We totally miss it if we do that. Salvation is sitting at this table and recognizing the compassion and grace and mercy that Jesus has shown us. It's sitting at this table and realizing that my responsibility, like Zacchaeus, is to look where there is oppression, to look where there are people who are hurting, to look where there are people who need help, and saying, I have a responsibility on this side of the table to reach across and do something about it. And then Jesus looks at me and says, salvation has come to this house. And there are other times I find myself on the other side of the table. I find myself in that other place where I'm going through something that I didn't expect to go through, and I'm hurting. And my life is a mess. And I need somebody to come along and show me compassion and grace and mercy and lift me up. And somebody does. They look across the table and they go, I'm here for you. And I say, salvation has come to my house. Salvation has come through that person. And we've seen this in action. We've all seen this. We experienced this at a church when we lost a friend who passed away. And all of a sudden, all these people came alongside his wife and said, we are here for you and we love you and we care for you. You are going through a hard time. And Jesus looks and says to all of us, to those who show that kind of grace and that love and mercy, he says, salvation has come to your house. And she says, salvation has come to my house. We don't just experience it, we live salvation out. This is why the story of Zacchaeus matters so much. It wasn't some random story about a guy who just wanted a better glimpse of Jesus. It's a story that gives us a better glimpse of what Jesus wants for us. Zacchaeus is the embodiment of what Jesus announced in that synagogue that day. Zacchaeus wasn't just forgiven, he was set free to become someone who would set others free. Isn't that awesome? He experienced empathy from Jesus, and that encounter sparked a chain reaction of justice, repentance, and restoration. It's why we say when you receive love and grace and mercy from Jesus, you give love and grace and mercy to others. If we're going to follow the way of Jesus, we need to learn what this means to experience and live out the good news. Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, half my possessions. I'm going to do something tangible." The ancient world was different. Zacchaeus didn't live in the rich neighborhood. Zacchaeus saw it every day. Zacchaeus, as a chief tax collector, went up and saw the people that were hurting. He saw the oppressed. He saw the marginalized of this world. And he looked at them as people that, too bad for them. Well, they're probably at fault for it. It's probably their fault that they're in their situation. I'm not going to help out with them. That's tough luck. He was smug and he was arrogant. Then he meets Jesus. And he has the same opportunity. He looks at these people, and all of a sudden, his entire vision is changed. And he looks at these people, and he says, "What am I doing? I don't need all this junk because they need. I don't know. Did he fire all the other people? Did he fire all the... I don't know. Did he look at the tax collectors and goes, "Guys, you got it all wrong"? Like, I wonder how many of them started to follow Jesus. And I wonder how many of them went back to their communities and their neighborhoods and looked for people who were marginalized, looked for people who were oppressed, and did something about it. If you don't leave this place, if you just get off your chair, get in your car, go to your house, and think the same stuff, then I don't know what we're doing here. We're wasting our time. We should be walking out the doors of this place, looking where people are marginalized, oppressed, and hurt, and saying, "What can I do to bring salvation to this world?" That's our call. That is what we're meant to do. So Jesus didn't give Zacchaeus a blessing and move on. He stayed at his house. He let him wrestle with what he'd done. And then when Zacchaeus decided to make things right, when salvation went from an experience he had to something that was lived out, Jesus says, "Now you get it." Can you imagine the pride on Jesus' face? This is my favorite story for this. I just love this. I love that I can see Jesus looking at him going, "You got it. You finally got it." And I just love that. That's what I want Jesus to feel about us, is that he looks at us and goes, "You got it. You got it." And that's what he's going to do. He's never going to look at you. Because someday I have the hope of heaven. I have the hope of heaven, and I hope for that day that I get to see, and we talked about it this morning with the band, this huge, giant banquet table with billions and billions of people sitting at the table, and I get all of eternity to go through that table and welcome everybody and say, "Man, I'm glad you're here too." That's why I need eternity to do it, because of all the people. This table is not going to be small, it's going to be huge. And I have this feeling when I get there that I'm going to look at Jesus, and again, I'm just making all this up. I don't know if this is true or not. I'm just telling. I don't know. I haven't been there. Okay, this is just my idea. I'm going to Jesus, and I look at Jesus, and I go, "Jesus, did I get it right? Did I do the right things?" He's like, "What did you read the story? Did you get off your chair and go take care of the oppressed and the marginalized? Did you make it? Did you do what you needed to? Yeah." "But Jesus," and then somebody walks up and they go, "But Jesus, didn't that guy love too much?" Jesus goes, "What are you talking about? Jesus didn't they let too many people in the doors? And Jesus goes, what are you talking about? And he says, but Jesus, I just wonder, don't you think that they should have been a little bit more policing of people coming to the table? He goes, what are you talking about? He says, I gave you a job. He said, I gave you a story to tell you what your job wasn't. Do you people pay attention? I told you not to be the person putting their arms like this, grumbling about who's sitting with Jesus. I told you to be the people going, hey, there's a big table here, and you're welcome to sit. Would you like to come with me? He said, that's all I asked of you. No, you can't love too much, but you can sure love too little. Salvation does take a side. Salvation takes the side of healing over harm. Salvation takes the side of freedom over oppression. Salvation takes the side of compassion over greed every single time. There is not a time that you can go, well, does greed win out this time? No. There is not a time that you can go, well, maybe harm's okay in this instance. No. There's not a time that you can say, well, maybe we should oppress some people. No. That's not how it works. That's not the way of Jesus. See, sometimes we receive these things and sometimes we offer them. That's the good news. We bring it, we receive it, we live it out today. The beauty of salvation is experienced as we love God and we love others. It's not a one-time event. It keeps happening. It keeps drawing us closer and closer and deeper and inviting us to participate in what God is doing in the world, in and through us. Isn't that cool? Salvation happens every single day. Today, Jesus is looking up in this tree at every one of us, and he is calling our names, and he said, come on, come be a part of what I'm doing. Come be a part and participate in it. Let salvation come to your house and be a part of giving and receiving the goodness of God in this world. And guys, I think if we live like that, why can't it just start here? Can it just start with this group of people? I think it's happening in other places around the world. I'm not saying that nobody else is getting this, but I'm saying we got to get this. I want us to get this here because I want to change this community's mind about Jesus. I want people to say, yeah, you know those Jesus-following weirdos over at Southeast? Man, they show compassion and grace and mercy and love. Yeah, because it's the way of Jesus. And they take serious the idea that they have a responsibility to go into their community and love and transform the world. Not by convincing anybody of anything, but by loving people and caring for people and showing compassion and grace and mercy. And just imagine the ripple effects. Imagine what that could do to this world. I get it. The world feels like a dumpster fire. Then put it out. Stop staring at it. Grab a fire hydrant and let's go. Let's go change the world, okay? Right? God, we are so thankful for passages like this that challenge us, that don't just feel good, but actually convict us and challenge us to go and make an impact and a difference in this world. God, I want to be someone that you say salvation has come to this house because I didn't just say the right things about faith, but I did the right things. Help us to see those things. Help us to experience them. Help us to live that out in this world in such a way that your love is experienced by everybody that we encounter. God, we are so thankful for this table that we're invited to, that everyone is invited to. It's your name that we pray. Amen.